Hi, this is Elizabeth Phillips, and I'm presenting my lesson on self-portraits versus selfies. This lesson is geared towards high school students. The learning objectives are that students will be able to compare and contrast self-portraits from various artists through classroom critique and discussion. Students will be able to reflect on how identity and personality were expressed through self-portraiture, and students will be able to analyze the effect of different light sources on a subject and its effect on the mood of a photograph. In this lesson, students will learn about the art of self-portraits and be charged with creating their own. Students will be exposed to visual thinking strategies through the discussion of famous self-portraits of various photographers, and we will be comparing them to selfies on the internet. The class will discuss what makes a good portrait, what makes a portrait unique and memorable, and what makes a portrait forgettable. I will concentrate on the direction of lighting, backgrounds, and the emotions conveyed. We will begin our class by discussing, have you ever taken a selfie? And have you ever taken a self-portrait? And do you know the difference? We will examine the definition of a selfie and some examples from the internet. And we will examine the definition of a self-portrait. We will be visiting some famous artists' self-portraits. I will introduce them to Robert Cornelius's 1839 image that lays claim to being the first self-portrait. We will then examine some famous photographers' self-portraiture. Throughout looking at these different galleries, we will be asking questions about the background. Is it sharp? Is it in focus? Is it blurry? What's included in the photograph? What's omitted? What does the lighting do to the mood of the photograph? And what is the artist trying to say about themselves through their self-portraiture? We'll be looking at Trish Morrissey and comparing her self-portraits to those of the other photographers I've selected. We'll be looking at Robert Mapplethorpe. We'll compare some of his younger self-portraits to some of his older ones when he was dying of AIDS. And we'll look at Cindy Sherman. Her portraiture tends to reflect somewhat of a selfie genre, but they're actually fictitious characters she's created. The object of discussing those artists is to get them to look at the entire photograph from corner to corner and not just the portrait themselves. After examining and discussing the photographs, we will take a closer look at lighting. I will have a volunteer sit in the stool in the middle of the classroom, and students will walk around the volunteer while I keep the light aimed at the students. I'll be raising and lowering the light as I go, moving in closer and farther away, and then I'll take another rotation with a diffuser in front of the light to demonstrate harsh and hard lighting versus soft lighting. Students will identify the direction of the light and what it does to the shadows, and compare how the light feels. What does harsh lighting make you feel versus soft lighting? There is no right answer to these questions. We will be discussing how light is simply a tool the photographer uses to convey emotion. We'll discuss which kind of light looked the most dramatic versus which kind of light seems the most flattering. Students will be asked to come back to class with two portraits. The two portraits must have different backgrounds, different lighting, and unique poses, and the students must be ready to explain the choices they made and why they made them. Famous educator Maxine Greene says, part of teaching is helping people create themselves. The Latin roots of portray tells us that a self-portrait is to draw forth and represent oneself. When you take your own picture, you are attempting to extract and depict who you are. People do this for two basic reasons: to explore and better understand themselves and to express themselves to others.